Hello, my name's Luke George and I'm having conversations with courageous educators. Today's guest is passionate about leadership and well-being and how they live together in a symbiotic state. Katrina Bourke didn't actually start life as that passionate teacher, but she soon found her calling in leadership. She felt if she could support staff, then the students would benefit. So after 20 years as a leader, Katrina now helps principals get stuff done, minus the pain and suffering. So welcome, Katrina Bourke. How are you today?
Hey, Luke. Thank you for having me. I am great. The sun is out today. It's been a really gloomy winter. I feel like it has been anyway. And so when the sun's out, I don't know about you, but that just instantly boosts me anyway. So you've got me at a very good time.
Yeah, I agree 100%. There is a difference in my mood when it's that overcast, cloudy, rainy versus the next day being sunny, shiny, and it just seems like the world's far more alive. But I suppose that's that amazing thing of just a mindset, isn't it? Because it's still the same day, still the same person, but just that atmosphere can sometimes bring us into the wrong mind state.
Yeah, agreed. It's a good well-being. It's a good free well-being boost.
That's right. So let's just start. I love to start at the beginning. Katrina, where did you grow up? What was your family life like? And what were some of the magical moments that you had that you felt that may have led you into a career of teaching?
Well, I'm the eldest of 5 children, and my parents were young. My parents were the ultimate hippies when I was born, and we started life in Melbourne. But as the family grew, Mum and Dad were both very young, and neither of them had finished university. So affording to fit 5 kids and 2 adults in a house became harder. So Mum and Dad moved us. We moved to the Mallee region of Victoria, and they were able to afford a magnificent big sprawling house and property. And so that became, even though I was in my early teens when we moved there, that's probably the place I call home. And certainly I would say, being the eldest of 5 children, I reckon that's what led me into teaching. Like you said, I wasn't, I was never that person. During my teaching career, I would often come across people who would say, I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. When I was little, I used to set up classrooms with my teddy bears and my dolls, and I'd teach them, or I'd teach my sisters or cousins or whatever. And that was never me. And in fact, I used to feel a little bit not ashamed, but I wouldn't voice that I wasn't the person who had always wanted to be a teacher. I felt like maybe I was in the wrong place and I didn't belong, and I was a bit of an imposter. But it's only in recent years that I've been okay with saying, well, I wasn't born ready to be a teacher. However, I went into teaching, and I loved teaching, and I especially loved, as my career progressed, that I was able to step into that leadership space and work with adults, which is where I still am all these years later.
Yeah. It's quite good that you went through because you did a bit of work out there in the rural schools. And was it through the rural schools, not having a lot of staff on board, that you just start picking up other roles, and by osmosis, you were not only a teacher, but you actually started leading, but not necessarily with a title? Is that where you got that taste of, that leadership's not too bad?
Yes, I think that's right. In fact, the very first school I taught in, there were 2 classrooms, prep to 2 and year 3 to year 6. And I think there were maybe 3 staff members. Our principal was a teaching principal. She taught for half the week. And so, the opportunities and, in fact, really the responsibility to step up and do more than your allotted classroom teaching, that's how the place functioned and rolled. And I think depending on your definition of leadership, the definition I've come to hold dear about leadership is that It's about showing up as your best self and then inspiring and encouraging others to do that. And that's how we have the impact that it's our job to have as a leader. And so I think I did get a taste of that early because there were opportunities to step up and go beyond being a graduate teacher and to get feedback on that and to feel like, oh, I've got something to offer here to my colleagues and peers as well.
That's I was just imagining a young Katrina out in the bush as a teacher and then being asked to step up, as you have rightly said. And I feel as if the way you're speaking is if you stepped up with a bit of courage and you actually learnt on the job pretty quickly, but you actually enjoyed some of those difficult times that most of us might shine away from, i.e., not for me, I'll just do what I have to do, thanks. But there was something else that drew you to it. Was it that first point where you actually helped someone and they appreciated it, that then had a greater impact, that allowed you to be a little bit more courageous than you normally thought you might be?
Yeah, it's a really good question. What comes to mind are a couple of things. Firstly, autonomy. So autonomy is a significant driver for me. If we think about, from the neuroscience, there is an idea that we have a handful of particular drivers and one or two that are more dominant. And certainly autonomy is a significant one for me. And so, to have that opportunity to be more autonomous, I wasn't bound always by the curriculum. I was working, I could work with families and peers, colleagues, community beyond the school, and that really appealed to me. And was it about making it was about making a difference, and I guess seeing the different way that I could do that I could, work with families and make a difference to them in a whole different way that was beyond what I was doing in the classroom.
Yep, I
Does that
love
answer
that
your
idea.
question, Luke?
Yeah, it does, because what I've just found out was in regard to autonomy, so one of those traits that allows you to drive yourself forward, and we can capture that. And if that's what drives you, then absolutely hold on to it and keep moving forward. For someone else, it might be just that generosity. It's nearly going into the character VIA strengths, isn't it? Where we look at the 24 strengths and what we default to.
That's right, and I think there's a strong alignment there. Just for your listeners' interest, in case they want to look at that piece I was referencing, it comes from the Neuro Leadership Institute. So that's where I did my coaching training, and they have a model called the SCARF model, SCARF, and that's the acronym that they use to talk about those internal drivers. So just really briefly, if you would like, Luke, I can tell you what that acronym is.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's a great piece of awareness for leaders to know that we ourselves and those that we work with and lead have a combination of these drivers. So the acronym SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relationships, and fairness. And the Neuro Leadership Institute say that we have all of those, and we have one or two that are more dominant, perhaps, or more important to us. And you're right, it's just like via strengths. We have all of those strengths, but we have those 5 signature strengths that tend to be more dominant or more hardwired for us.
Is that also a sense that you would have done a survey like you do in the VIA character strengths? And when you did that survey, did it then show that autonomy was also your highest? Do you do a diagnostic for that as well, for the SCARF?
Yeah, you can do a survey. For those of your listeners, most of your audience are educators, of course. And when you go online to do that SCARF survey, it's kind of the language and the context is more of a corporate model, but I'm sure your listeners are smart. You can work it out. You can adapt it to still give you feedback as a human and a leader. You don't have to be in that corporate context to do it.
All right. Well, there's already one little insight that we've got so far, Katrina. So very grateful for that little bit of bit of information. Now let's move forward a little bit. And this part here is maybe we'll call it a turning point, but maybe also an epiphany when you were sitting in your car. It's early morning in the car park. You've got your head in your hands and you're actually crying because you don't want to go into school. So how did you get to that point, and did you eventually get in there, and what was the epiphany?
Yeah. Well, how did I get to that point? Gosh, years and years. And I think, you know what, I think it comes back to what I shared with you first about being the eldest of 5 children. My the way that impacted me, perhaps, and the way that I grew up was that was very much about responsibility and enduring. So, you know, being almost another adult in the house to my younger siblings. And also I grew up in a family where intellect and intelligence and knowing and learning was really important. And so the way that I took that on was around perfectionism and needing to know everything. And so as a leader, what I became was what I would now call a hero leader. I was all things to all people. So if you needed a problem solved, I wanted to be the one to solve it. If you needed to know where something or someone was, I was the one to come to. I was very much the go-to leader, and I loved it. I loved being that. It fed all of those parts of me that said that's what a good leader is, or a good eldest daughter is. You do what needs to be done. And so now I know, and I learned that is not a sustainable way of being for our own well-being. And of course, it's not a way of leading either, because it's that rescuer model rather than the coach and the challenging model. So that's that, and a whole combination of context and the situation that I was working in at the time. All of that led to me sitting in the car park in tears. And yes, I did get in, and it was between the car park and the front door of the school that I had the epiphany, because I was talking to a friend on the phone, crying to a friend on the phone, and she beautifully coached me and encouraged me she gave me the compassion that I couldn't give to myself, because at the time compassion seemed like a weakness. That's what I had learned. Compassion is weak. And so she gave it to me, and she said, why don't you go home and just, be slow for the day? And I said to her, no, I reacted to that no, because to me that was failure. I said, no, I'm going to put my armor on and I'm going to go in and do it. And it was that word of putting my armor on that thankfully triggered something within, some little wise voice within, which said, is that really how you want to do it? Is that the human and the leader you want to be, the one that has to put their armor on? And it was with that I began the process of that I still do now, around working out what was going on, deepening my self-awareness, and deciding whether I was in the right place doing the right thing for me.
That armor analogy certainly brings forward the Brené Brown work around dare to lead and wearing the armor, and how we as leaders can take that armor off and actually go in being vulnerable, to have that courage to face those same sort of questions that you had. Seems like a very real situation that obviously you can traject yourself back into that situation, but also give yourself a lot of empathy for leaders that you work with who also go through the same. In your leadership coaching area, do you find there's principals and deputy principals and emerging leaders actually coming in with their armor on each day?
Yeah, totally. And the vulnerability behind the armor is typically what if I'm not good enough for this, or what if I'm not really cut out for this? So perhaps I can start with emerging leaders, that when we begin our work together, that's where we begin. What do you, what's on your mind? What do you need in order to do this work? And self-belief, although they don't name it in those words typically, that's what it's about, because these are emerging leaders who are, they're keen to get into leadership. They want to make that contribution and stretch themselves. But like all humans, they have the vulnerability that goes, well, what if you're not good enough? And there are, we have the stories of, well, there are other people who know more than I do, or they're more experienced than I. And we can find all these reasons why we're not the right one for leadership. So that's the vulnerability I see for an emerging leader. And if we scoot along the spectrum to a more experienced leader, the vulnerability I see behind their armour is about the context of education at the moment. They are overwhelmed. It is fast. There's really kind of, there's something coming at you all the time. I use that analogy with principles of spinning plates, and they're just constantly trying to keep the plates spinning. They want more, and they know that there's more to it than that, but sometimes just keeping the plates spinning is more than enough. And so the vulnerability I often hear in them is, I used to be able to do this. What's going, am I not enough anymore? So it's the same. And, you mentioned Brene Brown. That's at the heart of so much of her work, that story of not being enough. And that's the same thing that I hear. So perhaps it's less about leadership, more about humans. We have that we have the tendency perhaps for that story. And then in the context that these leaders are in, it really kind of amplifies that. That's why I talk to them about that idea of sacred ground, like being grounded, having grounded confidence, so that even while you're spinning all the plates, you're grounded in your values and your vision, and that awareness of yourself. And that allows them to kind of release the armour, or at least know the armour's there, and then make choices about how and when they remove it.
Yeah. Now, we're in that space of leadership at the moment, and we're going to continue down that road. But before we go down there, it's actually another part of your work is in the area of well-being. But that didn't start off with leadership. That was actually well-being for students, and you were actually up the front, teaching students about well-being, looking after themselves. So how did you then get the transition from teaching students well-being to actually then incorporating that into your educational quiver or toolkit to be able to help leaders and teachers to be better versions of themselves? The transition across, where did that come from?
Yeah. Well, I think I always loved wellbeing. That's what I did. I did a master's in wellbeing. It was, it was kind of dear to my heart. And I guess when you have a passion like that, you talk about it and you embody it. And even when I stepped out of teaching that and into the deputy principal role, that was still, a big part of what I did, even in the way that I interacted, I think was, wellbeing was at the heart of it for the students and my colleagues. And so then how did that end up with me working with leaders and wellbeing? Well, it was the very beginning of my career after I had resigned from being a deputy principal. A colleague of mine who I had been a DP with phoned me after a little while and said, she was then a principal, and she said, I'd really love you to come and do some things with the staff. We're dealing with a lot of stress. And as a business owner who'd read the 101 book, that said, say yes, go and do that. So I did. But you know what? Gosh, that was just an incredible turning point, because with that principle and with those staff, we co-created what mattered to them in the space of wellbeing. And I was able to bring my skills of coaching and the way that I like to work, which is around co-creating and collaborating. I didn't have a program, and I still don't, and I don't want one. We created together what that would be. And, 10 years later, I continue to work with that school in that space.
Yeah.
I do, and I continue to learn from them and with them. And in fact, the work that I have done with them led me to realize that in my own work with leaders, well-being is a part of, it's a leadership essential. It's not a standalone. That's how I see it. And so now it has allowed me to lean into my love of leadership and working with leaders and address well-being within that. So it's a holistic approach rather than this week we're looking at well-being.
Yeah, just in those words, when you're talking about a holistic approach, I believe that's what I see is quite the opposite, as in we have well-being and we have leadership. Yet to be a human, we need both to arrive to be our best version of ourselves more often. It's about having that space to lean into in well-being, knowing that I need to be looking after myself, so then I can lead authentically and model what this looks like for the rest of my staff. So it's that classic of I can't tip into other people's cup if mine's empty. So I need mine to be full, and I need to work on myself so then I can fill other people's cups.
Completely right. And isn't that where the challenge is? You would have heard this, Luke, talking to leaders. Then we have a whole other battle that emerges, don't we, around the practical of time to take care of myself in order to take care of others. And those stories again, the guilt around it, I should be doing this instead. Or, as a leader who's out of the classroom, is it, I shouldn't go for a walk during the day when teachers are in the classroom. There's this whole battle that goes on that we struggle with.
Yeah. And certainly if a leader does go for a walk through the school, they'll be stopped within about the first 2 meters to be asked a question that's just added to all of the stress they've just had to try and walk it off. Right. So yeah, even walking is going to be problematic.
Yeah, well, they need to bring their runners to school, maybe take a jog from once they get to the school gate, they can walk, but it's a sprint beforehand.
That's right. Now, I'm interested in that one of the big pieces that you also speak about is self-awareness and how important self-awareness is. It seems to be like a good starting point. Do you want to just expand on how you see self-awareness and why that's important for leadership?
Yeah, I want to just go back to what you had said about, that idea of leading self and taking care of self in order to take care of others and to be the leader. In the framework that I have, where sacred ground is at the heart of that, leadership sacred ground, the first thing that we work through is getting clear on your vision and your values. And so I need to know where I'm going as a leader in order to lead. I need to know what's grounding me, what I'm aligned with, what are my non-negotiables. And when I know that, then that's going to help me determine what are the practices that I need to honour in order to show up as that leader. But the piece in the middle, the link, is the self-awareness, as I see it anyway. I need to become aware of the human and the leader that I am. So how do I actually show up? It's great to have a vision and an aspiration, but what's the reality? What are my strengths? What are my habits, the good ones and the not so good ones? What are my biases? Yep. What are my shadows? All of these pieces are important because, again, they're going to feed into the toolkit of what I need to do to take care of myself and lead myself in order to lead others. And I guess when it comes to self-awareness, the other piece to mention, and I know that you're aware of this, Luke, is that work from Tasha Eurich, where she and her team studied self-awareness, and they said that there were two parts to that. So there's my awareness of myself as a human and a leader, and also my awareness of how others see and perceive me. And the fun part of that research, I think, is that we as humans tend to think we have pretty good self-awareness, and yet her research has found, I think it's something like about 10%, like a really minuscule amount of us actually have great self-awareness in both of those areas. Yeah.
Well, that's 100%. We all think that we're self-aware, but are we really self-aware? It's like the what we observe, two people looking at the same picture. get completely different angles and perceptions of what that picture looks like. And yet we would say that we would be fully self-aware of what's around us, but also what's within inside us. Now, I'm interested also in your support triangle that you speak about, one of your models. In how does that actually work when you have, I think it starts with you have the outsider, you have the offsider, and then there's the top of that triangle. So who's that, and how do those other two pieces fit into it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I like to think about that like a tripod for a camera or a video camera. Those three parts form the legs. So it's insider, offsider, and outsider. These are the people I think that we need to, as leaders, have around us. And it is when we have those three legs, if you imagine the video camera on top of the tripod, you can take a video without the tripod. You can take it with one or two legs of the tripod, but you're going to get the best and the clearest and the broadest perspective when you have all three legs down and providing stability. So that's how I think about it. And to unpack each of those briefly. So the insider is me. I need to be doing my own work of self-awareness. And that's that stuff I just talked about vision and values and self-awareness and honouring practices, etc. So that's me on the inside. I need to take care of that. And then I need to have people around, because exactly of Tasha Urich's work, I don't have all the answers and I don't have all the awareness. The best I can do is have the open mind to it and the curiosity. And so my offsiders, if we're talking about a school leader, they're my fellow school leaders. They're the ones I can pick the phone up to and, rant about the system or a particular challenge. They'll get it. They're working in a similar context. They're there beside me, commiserating or celebrating with me. They're my offsiders. They're the people who get it and are in the trenches with me. And they're important because we do need to be able to call and to vent and, to safely take that armor off and to be vulnerable. I don't know how to do this. Have you got any ideas? So we need our offsiders, and equally we need some outsiders. And they're the people who are not down in the trenches with me. They're a little removed. So they can hold that mirror up, in a gentle kind of way, but also they can challenge me with kindness about how I'm showing up or how I'm seeing things. So they're typically, for some principles, I'm an outsider. As a coach, I can hold that mirror up and help them with the work that they're doing. And so together, when I'm doing my work, I've got my offsiders around me who are there to prop me up and celebrate with me and, provide that relational stuff. And then my outsiders who are going to bring a different perspective and nuance. Then I reckon we've got a pretty steady approach to how we're showing up and how we're checking how we're showing up.
Yeah. It's sort of like that saying about the 5% of the average of the people that you hang around with. So, if you're equal to the average of the people that you hang around with, then you got to look at the people who you're hanging around with, basically, and how what are they doing? What are they encouraging? How do they encourage, inspire you? How do they challenge you? And I really like your analogy of the tripod and the camera, because you do get a clearer vision when you have all of those three legs of the tripod grounded, and also who to call on, and you also understand when you need to call on them, because you're looking within yourself, being the insider, and you can't quite get that answer. And that's why we need the other two legs. Is it an outsider? Is it an offsider? So I'm just loving that sort of space. And to lead, at least you go in there with a lot of confidence because you have that support base around you. So the most exciting part, I think, coming up for you, Katrina Bourke, is that you've got a book. A book is about to be published. It's at the publishers right now, or the editors. That must be a pretty exciting piece of work. What was it like writing the book, and what was it like actually putting it together as a journey for yourself?
Well, I love Brene Brown's work, and we've mentioned her a couple of times already. I can't recall which book it was that she wrote, but I remember listening to her talk about it in an interview afterwards. And she said, this book kicked my ass. And I remember just kind of being curious about that. And I've since heard someone else say that, an author say that about their book. And now, as someone who is soon to be published, I get it, because this book kicked my ass and I was not expecting it. I thought that after nearly 10 years of doing this work and working with leaders, and through my own experience and the great privilege of hearing the stories of many leaders I've worked with, I had created that model around sacred ground. And I thought, well, I'm going to put this into a book now. There is value there for other leaders. At the heart of the book, it's about showing up bravely and vulnerably as your best self. And the irony of writing this book was that I let the vulnerability get the better of me, those stories of what if it's not good enough. And there were two ways that happened. And the first way was I had some advice about my book and, who the audience should be and some things that I should and shouldn't include in it. And so I followed that advice, and I felt it while I was writing it. I felt myself off my own sacred ground. I felt it. I knew I wasn't in alignment, but I thought, well, they know better than me. They've written books before. I need to follow the advice. And and then I sent it off to the editor, who promptly came back and said, "Who is this book for?" So it was almost like start again. So talk about irony of what I was writing about. I wasn't aligned with it. So anyway, the next version, when I came back to my center and what are my values and my vision for this book, and followed my own advice, much better result. So we'll see when it comes out what you think. But that was the one. And then the second way those stories showed up was when the draft was ready to go to the publisher. I couldn't push the button on it. I had to ring the publisher, and I could almost hear her sigh and settle into her seat. So I reckon she's done this 1,000 times before, but she had to coach me through pushing the button. And I was saying, what if it's no good? What if it's not of value? What if it doesn't help people? All of these stories and fears that I had. And she helped me. I reckon if she could have, she would have come to my house and pushed the button for me, but she very patiently coached me to do it.
It's amazing the barriers that we put in front of ourselves, isn't it? Like, it's just pushing a button, but mentally it was more than that. It was all of yourself were in these pages, and all of these doubts yet again. And I think in our stories and throughout this podcast, I've heard this imposter syndrome idea enter, and I believe all of us do that 100%. Like anything that's new, it must be imposter syndrome. But we actually forget that wherever we are now, at some stage, yes, we were an imposter because we've just arrived, but now we're not. So somehow we get through it until the next challenge, and then we just keep reverting back to that's where we go. I don't know why we keep going there, because we've actually survived to get to this particular point. Well, I'm actually really looking forward to your book, and let's give it a value that it's worth, which is the title, who's it for, and what would I get out of it if I read it?
So I can't tell you the title because it's still there's still negotiations around that. So stay tuned on that. I'm not even going to put it out in the world because honestly, it would be a red herring. So stay tuned on the title. And sorry, Luke, what was the second part of your question?
The second one was, who's it for, and what would I get out of it if I read it?
Well, it's for leaders, and it's for emerging leaders, aspiring leaders, experienced leaders. It's for leaders who want to show up and be their best and to make a difference to the communities they lead, the people around them, their families. It's for leaders. And what will you get from it? I hope that what you'll get from it is encouragement. I hope that what you'll get is a look in that mirror that allows you to see that, we all have the stories and the unhelpful habits. And yet, if we can get beyond that and have the courage to show up and to use our voices and to be, to follow that kind of inner spark that we have, we need that. Our world needs that. And, particularly I work in the education space, and I'm convinced we need more and we need better leaders. And it is a really challenging role. That's no surprise to anyone. So we need grounded leaders who know what they're there for, who are aligned. And we don't need you to be the biggest and the loudest and the best and the award winner. What we need you to be is genuine and courageous and grounded. And I hope that what the book gives is the encouragement to be that, and the encouragement to see that actually you already are that. We just need to help you show up consistently as that.
Wow. That's got and I can see leaders that would absolutely relish reading that sort of material, because we all do want to be our best. We do want to show up as our best. And the other part is, I don't want to doubt whether I'm my best. I just want to know and feel confident that I'm my best, and not for anyone else to be able to judge me, but just saying, well, this is the best I can be. And I've done the work to be able to be here. And will it be challenging moving forward? Yes, it will be. But that's just another challenge that I can take on board, having like your tripod model of those sort of people around me. Because that's the sort of information, and I know that it'll be very much a deep dive into all of those little spaces that I can actually do something about that. And maybe I do need some better outsiders or offsiders, or even just need to look deeper within myself that could unlock the potential that sits inside me as a leader moving forward. So I'm really looking forward to when that book comes out, and I'll definitely be promoting it because I think some of your work is absolutely, or all of your work, I should say, is absolutely magnificent, and certainly helping teachers, educators, leaders to be better people and front up as the best version of themselves. What do you think, from your experience, a couple of little questions more about opinions, is what does success look like to you in regards to a school? How do we see a successful school? What would they be doing to say this is successful, besides the classic academic NAPLAN results and PAT tests? But how do I get a vibe that this is a successful school? What would you say to that?
Well, I reckon it's an expansion of what we've been talking about. So for your listeners, in my mind, I kind of have a circle, this evolution of the leader, or the journey to sacred ground. And as I've mentioned, the first part of that is knowing our vision and our values. And so when I work with leadership teams, and that's the first thing we do. We dedicate the time to getting clear on what is the vision and the purpose of this leadership team, and what are the values that ground and guide this team who have such an impact back in the school. And then we then go with, I think it was Jim Collins, he says something like, the vision is like 1%. 99% of the work is in alignment to the vision. And so then I think, to come back to your question around success, the success is in the doing the work of alignment. It's great to create the vision. Then are we remaining aligned to it? And are we having the conversations that help us check in on, are we aligned to it? The great celebratory conversations, as well as those more courageous, crucial conversations. Do we know how to have them when we're not in alignment? And are we open to testing our vision and making sure that how that's rolling out is for the good of all. So I think I don't think it's so much in the, for me anyway, it's not about having a checklist of if you're doing all of these things and you're a successful school. Rather, we know where we're headed. We've got clear vision, and we do the work of being in alignment with that.
Yeah, I like that idea. It's not necessarily a checklist. To me, I think a really good way of testing or giving a litmus test to culture and a successful school is literally by asking any teacher, any educator, any staff member about those sort of questions. So what is the vision for the school, and for them to be able to actually articulate it. And then another question coming from what you're saying about alignment is be able to say, so what are your behaviours and what do you do that actually is directing towards that? Now, if we've all done our work and the leader has modelled the vision and has interest and a passion and a commitment for that vision, then that would be empowering other people to be able to behold it, own it, and actually be part of it. I think that would be, to me, a successful school, because everything would run from underneath that, because we all know where we're trying to get to. And what about, Katrina Bourke, in the space of where's your happy place? Where do you go to be able to take all of this work that I know that you're very busy in that space? So how do you actually relax, and where do you find that happiness, either daily, weekly, momentarily, hourly? What's your sort of routine to be able to get yourself and be able to actually be part of wellbeing? Because I know how much you'd love it.
Oh gosh, so many things. I'll mention just a couple. I have a daily practice. Now, this one came only recently, actually, did I add this one, but I love it. It's from Jerry Lynch, I think. I will send you the podcast that I listen to, but Jerry Lynch, he's like a prolific author, and he comes out of the sports psychology performance space, if I'm remembering correctly. I'll send you the link. Anyway, he talks about this idea of winning the day.
Yes.
And when I first began this, I talked about the idea of claiming the day. And I would think, right, I'd wake up in the morning, and I'm on when I wake up. And I'd wake up and I'd be like, right, what's happening today? And who am I going to be? And with Jerry's wisdom, I've actually calmed that right down. And part of claiming the day for me is, before I let this brain switch on and start bouncing around the place, is a really simple thing. It's just having 5 really slow breaths before I even get out of bed. So I'm setting the tone for the day and we know that science around those deep belly breaths, supporting our kind of rest and digest, turning off that fight or flight. So I do that before I get up. That's a daily thing. Whenever I can, I am out in nature. Luke, I'm climbing a mountain, not a steep one, but I'm out in the bush, and just being inspired by the beauty and the awe of nature around me.
It's with your reference back to young Jerry there in regards to the 5 breaths, but more about the winning the day. It reminds me of Marcus Aurelius, who said, win the morning, win the day. And it comes back to, what do we do in the morning that actually sets us up for the day? I think that's actually crucial. I always talk about that with any teams that I'm working with, is how do you actually set yourself up? Is it just get up and just have showers, get kids ready, get in the car and keep going? Or are you actually intentionally taking time to think about what's going to happen throughout that day? But I'm loving those 5 breaths. So easy, just before you start.
So easy.
Set yourself up. Hopefully that might be something that I'm going to have a little bit of a shot at, because now I can take it from the great wisdom of Katrina Bourke. So Katrina Bourke, super happy that we got to speak and talk about all these great things that you do with leaders, how you've got wellbeing is part of leadership, so it's not separate. I'm loving that sort of space. I'm loving that whole idea of a support network around leaders and basically people. I mean, anyone can do it. It's not just a leader. And then also there's those last little bits of wellbeing. So there's a lot in it. I'm looking forward to receiving and reading your book, and I'll be definitely be able to be praising the sorts of things that you do. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And I hope your day just keeps on ticking along as it always does.
Same to you, Luke. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that, having that conversation, and didn't know where that'd go, but I'll really enjoy listening back to and reflecting on where we did go. So thanks so much.
No worries. Thanks very much, Katrina Bourke, and thank you very much, everybody else. Bye now.